Welcome back to MZ Tech. Today I'll be doing a little bit of a comparison video amongst some of the most recommended gaming mice over the past couple of years. I've actually used some of them for a couple of years. These two, namely, I've used for almost 2 years. And these other three I've gotten over the past couple of months and I've had some good usage out of them. So I just wanted to kind of share some of my feedback on each one of them and sort of where I stand in terms of what I personally like the best, and I hope that helps you guys as well. So kicking it off, I'm starting off with G502 here. This is probably the oldest mouse I have here in my collection. I've been using it for just over 2 years, like I said, and some of the quick pros I'd like to talk about. So obviously it's fully customizable, meaning you actually have customizable weights. Right now I don't use any weights because it's already really heavy to begin with. And it has a free spinning scroll wheel option, which I really love, especially trying to scroll through so many web pages, long web pages and documents. It has a lot of programmable buttons. You can obviously bind any commands that you want. You have 5 profiles that you can save on board to the memory of the mouse, so you don't necessarily need to download software wherever you go. So that was just a quick recap of some of the features, what I'm sure you guys are probably already familiar with because this is one of the most popular ones. What I don't like. So I think part of the problem is the weight itself. It's actually quite heavy, so it's really hard to do some twitch movements and some quick fast movements on the mouse pad. So that's one of the biggest issues that I had with this one. The other problem also is that if you're not a claw grip gamer, that could be a downside, because the way this mouse is designed, especially if you see the right side here, this part comes out a little bit, so that kind of forces you to claw grip it, right? So if you set your hand on the table, you'll notice that I have to sort of squeeze my pinky as well as my ring finger in this way, which kind of forces me to claw grip it. So that's one other issue. It could be an issue if you're not a claw gripper, that is. Right, so that said, let's move on to the next one. The Roccat Kone Pure Optical. Some of the pros: very high quality material, very well built. There's no loose parts, no rattle of any sort whatsoever, and I think this probably has one of the best scroll wheels I've ever used. It's very tight, has nice defined scroll steps. The buttons are very nice, very easy to click in. Again, some of the issues I have with this one is it's very small for my hands, and you can see that there's this piece kind of popping out at the back here. Now, if you are not used to gripping it in a certain way and used to this sort of part here, this might become a little bit of an issue, especially for long-term gaming. So you have to keep that in mind. It kind of forces you, again, to grip it in a certain way. This would obviously be either a fingertip or claw grip for at least my hand size. And since we're speaking of hands, I have approximately 19.75 centimeter length from the tip of my finger all the way to the base, the first crease of the base of my palm, and the width, which I basically measured from the thumb down to the bone here of the pinky, is approximately 10.2 centimeters. So I would like to think I have slightly above average hands. I'm kind of in that unique sort of category where it's not considered to be small, but it's not considered to be really big either, so kind of in the middle. And then, that said, let's move on to the G403. So this is an interesting mouse. This is a relatively new entrant. I mean, it's still almost a year old, but what I like about this is it's got really good buttons on the sides, especially on the sides. There's not a lot of travel on the buttons. The grip style is actually, it could be very good, especially because the way it's shaped, it has a wider stance at the front here, you can notice. And it is a little bit of a higher profile at the back end. So if you like to cup your mice, this would be a very good option. You could palm this one, you could also claw this one. Just keep in mind though that the hump on the back is considered to be high profile. If I were to compare it to, let's say, if you guys are familiar with Zowie mices, in that one there's a ZA series, which is actually high profile, but I think this one is probably even a little bit more higher than that, if I'm not mistaken, because it actually runs through to the middle as well, whereas the Zowie ZA series actually has the hump furthermore at the back, and it kind of just ends right there. In any event, this is good for people who want to kind of cup it and even palm it, and who prefer a higher profile at the back end. Scroll wheel is it's fairly good. I personally like ones with a little bit more defined steps, kind of like the one that we saw here at Roccat. And like I said, the other buttons are actually very nice. They're very nice to click in. My problems with this mouse, so it you know, before I move to the cons, actually, there was one more thing, is that it's actually pretty lightweight. It's about 87 grams, so that's a good thing. So moving on to the cons, there's quite a bit of rattle that I was hearing, and it was not really from the scroll wheel. Unfortunately, it was from the sensor. And if you guys look at the forums, and if you look at some of the reviews out there, there's a lot of people mentioning that there's a bit of a sensor rattle issue. So I'll just hold this cable and kind of see if this camera can pick it up. So yeah, you could hear that very clearly. Now if I hold down the scroll wheel, sorry, so you can still hear it, right? So that's clearly the sensor rattling. So that's one bad thing. Now in terms of grip, like I said, it was fairly good for me, especially at the front end, because I like the wider area at this part of the mouse. But I actually did not like the high profile on the back. It almost kind of dug into my palm. It's only because of the way I grip my mice. I'm more of a hybrid grip. I have a hybrid grip style. So I land my palm a little bit on the back side, and then I kind of just, you know, sort of lift up my fingers at the front. And so this is kind of the grip style I have. And then if you notice, this part of the mouse would actually dig a little bit more into my palm, which is why I think this one doesn't really work too well for me specifically. But your mileage may vary. So now moving on to the infamous Zowie mice. These ones are actually very well known amongst especially the competitive players. These ones I have here is the Zowie. This one's the Zowie EC1-A. This one's the Zowie EC2-A, and already you can probably tell that there's a size difference. Other than that, they're pretty much identical. So this one has a much lower profile, so you can see on the back side, and the profile itself, or sorry, the height of it is actually more towards the center, the middle, I would say. And it's approximately 43 millimeters on the EC1-A, and it's about 40 millimeters on the EC2-A. Both of these mice are phenomenal. When I started playing with them, I actually saw a very significant improvement in my gaming and as well as in my aiming. What I would like to say is this one is, like I said, it's a bit more on the bigger side of things. It's a lot more comfortable to sort of relax palm it. So if you have a palm grip style and you kind of want to have a relaxed sort of, I would say, stance on the mouse, this would be perfect. My only problem with this is when in game, when you're trying to do some twitch movements, some really quick rapid turns and twists, this is a little bit harder to move. Especially with my hand sizes, it does require maybe a little bit more force, and you don't have that complete dexterity that you have with a slightly smaller size, and which is why the EC2-A actually works best for me. Like I said, I have that unique sort of hand size where it's kind of not really too big, not really too small, so that's why I think EC2-A actually fits me very, very nicely. I can actually palm claw. So hybrid, palm claw grip it very nicely, and I have the ability to actually move the mouse and twitch it very, very easily because it's a bit more smaller. So some of the pros I just wanted to, besides the grip that I wanted to talk about, was the coating. I absolutely love the coating on this mouse. Now, if you have very dry hands, you will notice that this will slip out of your hands. But if you start gaming for a couple of minutes, and even if you get a little bit of warmth in your hands, and a slight bit of sweat, this thing basically is glued to your hand. So you don't have to worry about that at all. But initially, like I said, if your hands are completely dry, then it starts slipping out of your hands. Another thing I should also note is, regardless of you having long gaming sessions, and if you still don't sweat, then, and you're primarily considered to be a dry hand user, then this would not work for you. So keep that in mind. But for me, it's actually worked very beautifully. The other thing is, you'll notice the subtle curves and smooth edges, which makes it such a pleasure just to grip it, because I think this is what really makes the Zowie mice stand out from the rest, is their shape and their, I guess their, like I said, the subtle curves and sort of the ledges. For example, you see the small ledge right here underneath the two buttons, so it kind of helps you to grip it better. And at the same time, the buttons don't come in the way when you're trying to move fast and pick it up and settle it down. Scroll wheel. Personally, I actually like the scroll wheel. I love the tactility of it. I know that some people have a problem with that, but me personally, I actually appreciate the defined steps, especially if you're using it for, even if you're using it for like switching weapons. Normally, I don't do it for all the weapons. For example, scroll up is weapon 1 for me, scroll down is weapon 2. So that's why I kind of appreciate that. Another thing I should also talk about is their switches. So these mice use Kone switches, which are a little bit more stiffer than the Omron switches. For FPS games, I actually prefer that. It kind of just gives me that sense that I won't misclick any buttons when I'm trying to settle it down and when I'm in the heat of the battle. The only thing I could say is if you're playing MOBA games or any games which require you to kind of spam the primary buttons, then that might become a little bit more difficult just because they're stiffer. So you might want to keep that in mind. Now, let me just give you a quick click comparison between all of these mice so that you have a bit of an idea of what I mean by the Kone switches versus the Omron. So here's primary buttons. The scroll wheel. So the EC1-A is pretty much the same, but I'll give you guys a little bit of a feel of how it sounds like. One more thing I should mention is it's pretty cool. So with all these EC mice, especially these two EC mice, you can actually just sort of tilt it to the right, and it would actually still click in. So check this out. So I'm let's just say I'm clicking here, and then suddenly I want to switch a weapon or do something with the click on the mouse wheel. I can just sort of side tilt it, and it would still click in. That's what I really love. Even though this mouse does not actually have a side scroll feature, I can still sort of click it this way, and it actually clicks in perfectly to change a weapon or whatever function you have mapped to it. Now moving on to the Logitech. So the primary buttons are Omron, including these two side buttons. This button actually enables the free spin, and you can lock it back into place again. There's a profile switcher button here, or you could map it to wherever you want. Moving on to the Roccat Kone Pure Optical. And finally the G403. See, the scroll wheel is not as defined as the others. But I guess for some players actually do prefer that, so for those players that would be a good option. One last thing I'd like to talk about is the cable. So 403, Roccat, Kone Pure Optical, G502 all have braided cables. The Zowie EC series actually have rubber, soft rubber cables, and they have a special coating which makes it more smoother. And I prefer this a lot more than braided cables. Braided cables can actually cause a lot of issues, especially when they start fraying. So you can see that it's right here at the connection point. Here it's fraying. It's actually fraying at other areas too, and it starts catching on to material on your table, whether it's, you know, let's say your mouse pad or something else on your table, and so that can cause some issues. So let's keep that in mind. So that's another big pro on the Zowie mice. So with that said, guys, I pretty much I've given you a good feedback of at least my personal view on all these mice. I personally love the EC2-A, and I'm going to be keeping this one, especially for competitive FPS gaming like CSGO and even Overwatch. So I hope this had helped you, and I'll be catching you guys in the next one. Have a great day.